Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing 10 cards I made using one of Love from Lizi's January add-ons. This paper pack is called Watercolor Wonders. It includes 16 sheets of 8x8 pattern paper. 8 of the sheets are specialty papers like glitter, pearlescent, or fabric textured. The other 8 are double-sided. The designs are just lovely with colorful and bold patterns. This isn't a kit, so there aren't any stamps, dies, or embellishments included. So I used items from former Love from Lizi kits and mega packs for my cards. For card number 1, I'm using Freshly Made Sketches number 368. I used some of this striped paper for the background. It's really pretty with a little bit of purple and pink, a little bit of yellow there. And since it's such a busy pattern paper, I did use some solid cardstock for those rectangular elements on the sketch. And then I always love adding lots of layers, so I did use some of this purple cardstock that's just from my craft room to add all those nice matted layers. I put a little bit of ribbon across the middle of the card just to kind of anchor all of those elements together. And then I cut out some ovals, and then also this little thank you die that was in a previous Love from Lizi kit. Just cut that out with some of the same purple cardstock. And then I just used a small piece of the pink cardstock to cut out the little heart. So just going to add that with just a touch of some liquid adhesive. And then one thing I always love to do is add just that small little strip of paper, usually the same pattern paper as the outside of the card, just on the inside of the card. It just adds just a little extra detail. And I'm just going to add some sequins around the bottom of that oval. And yes, my glue just kind of splooged out on me a little bit there, but no problem. I just cleaned it up. And I believe this sequin mix is from the July kit. So I always keep the little bits that are extra left over from the kits because you never know when you'll need them for another card. And that is card number 1. So now I'm on to card number 2. I'm using Mojo Monday sketch number 474. So most of the designs in this paper collection are really busy, but there are a couple of the papers on the opposite side that have a very muted kind of tone-on-tone pattern. So when I'm choosing sketches, I'm looking for things that'll work well with the paper designs and possibly with the sentiments or images that I want to add on the card. So with all of these really busy pattern papers, I want to look for a sketch that I won't be combining too many designs on one card. Another thing that really helps is just to use some solid colored cardstock to add some matted layers. It adds some nice contrast and breaks up some of those busier designs. So right now I'm just adding some black ribbon to the top of the card. And I didn't have a wide enough width of black ribbon, so I just used 2 pieces of this skinny black ribbon instead. I cut out a square using a faux stitch die, and this is where I'm going to add my image and my sentiment. The stamp set is from the January Love from Lizi kit, and it has this fun cloud and all these different raindrops that kind of fall from the cloud, and this one has little stars on it. So I'm going to heat emboss both the cloud as well as those little raindrops. So for the raindrops, I'm using some Love from Lizi embossing powder, and this is the warm navy color, and it's really pretty and it matches this pattern paper just perfectly. So I just got my pink embossing gun, and I'm just going to heat emboss all that. And it's hard to see, but it does have a very nice shine to it. So then now I'll add my cloud right above it, and they just line up really beautifully together. So I'm just using some of the Versamark embossing ink. I'm just going to make sure I get it straight. And of course it moved once I moved my finger away, so I had to readjust it again. And I usually stamp it a couple times just to make sure I have enough ink on there. And then this time I'm using some of the silver dollar embossing powder. And this is also one of Love from Lizi's embossing powders. She has a really nice collection of different colors. And they're nice and fine, so you get a really good detail when you heat emboss them. So now that I have that ready, I'm going to add a sentiment right in the center of the cloud. This stamp set is really fun since most of the sentiments actually fit inside the cloud. And I just used some plain black ink for the sentiment. So now, since I heat embossed twice on this little square, it kind of curled up a little bit. So I did use a lot of adhesive on the back just to make sure it would lay nice and flat on the card. So now I'll just go ahead and assemble all of that, and I want to make sure my banner isn't going to cover up the sentiment when I put it all together. Then I'll just remove the backing on the score tape that's holding the ends of the ribbon down and adhere the whole card front onto a card base. And then of course one little strip of the pattern paper on the inside of the card. So that is card number 2. So now I'm on to card number 3. I'm using Sweet Sunday sketch number 236. So I've already cut out all of the papers according to the measurements on the sketch. But first I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment. And this is a great sentiment for encouraging, uplifting cards. So it just says, spread more love. I believe this was in the December monthly kit, but it's also available individually. So I'll have a link to that below. The background paper is one of the pearlescent specialty papers that's included in this paper pack. And it's really beautiful with all the pink and purple and a little bit of blue in there. And because it's such a busy pattern, I didn't want to combine any more of the pattern papers. So I'm just using some solid cardstock for that strip that goes across the bottom of the card, as well as all of the cardstock for layering. So I decided to do some double matting for my sentiment. So I first put it on some pink cardstock and then again on the purple. And I do want to pop it up just a little bit. So I'm just going to use some foam adhesive on the back of that. I used some thinner foam dimension just in the middle of that piece, just where it goes over the layers of cardstock. That way it stays nice and even on the card. So I'll just go ahead and put that card front onto a card base. So then I decided to add just a couple of peel-offs right below the sentiment. These are the Lilac Mirror color, and I believe this was in the September Super Kit. So they're really pretty, and I still have a little over half a sheet, so it was kind of perfect just to use some of the small scraps there. So now I'll put one of the pattern paper pieces on the inside of the card. And then just a little finishing touch, I'm going to add a few sequins, and I don't remember which kit this one was from. This, once again, it might have been the July kit. So just a few leftover sequins, and that is card number 3. So now I'm on to card number 4. So this sketch is Sweet Sunday sketch number 230. The background paper is one of the specialty papers that has glitter embedded all over it. So it's really pretty, but it's nice because it doesn't come off. So again, I'm going to avoid combining too many of the busy patterns together. So for that other rectangular piece, I just used that muted green pattern that's on the back side of one of the other pattern papers. And for the sentiment, I'm using that Flutterby stamp set again. It just has a whole bunch of nice, uplifting, positive sentiments. And it's a stamp set I'm going to use quite often. So it's really handy, and I love that it has the bigger and bold sentiments on it. And I don't do a whole lot of coloring images, but I really love these butterflies. These are included in that same stamp set with the sentiment. So I decided to stamp it on some yellow cardstock, and I'll just do it a couple of times to get a really good solid impression. And so instead of coloring, I already have some color on it because of the cardstock. So now I'm just going to do a quick fussy cut all around it, just leaving a really thin border. The butterfly stamps have such a nice detail to them, so you can easily just use the stamp and some cardstock and just have a beautiful image. So whenever I fussy cut, I like to use a real small pair of scissors, and I do tend to move the paper around rather than the scissors. I find it's just a little bit easier. And so I'm going to adhere that butterfly to the card, and since there are just a few layers, I want to make sure once again to have a nice even placement. So I just put a small piece of foam tape on just that little bit of the wing that's hanging over that white cardstock. And then a final little touch, I'm just going to add a little banner in that upper corner. And I did use some ATG, and I noticed later it did fall off. So I went back and used some liquid glue instead. And it's because the paper's glitter covered, it just didn't hold as well. So that is card number 4. So now I'm on to card number 5. I'm using MFT sketch number 408. So for this card, I am combining 2 different pattern papers, and these are all purple. And instead of using a full sheet of this striped purple and white background, I just cut like it's an inch, inch and a quarter on each of them because it's mostly going to be covered up by the other pattern paper. And by using the black paper for layering, it does add some separation and some contrast. So I think the 2 patterns together look okay and it wasn't too busy. So then I pulled out my box where I keep all of the scraps of the specialty cardstock. So I have a bunch of little satin paper and the mirror paper, glitter paper. I keep all of it because you never know when you just need a little piece to add to your card. So I have some of this pinkish purple satin paper for that little strip underneath the sentiment. And then the thank you die, I use some of this purple pearlescent paper. I love all the little extra shine and sparkle that the specialty paper adds to the cards. And then I wanted to add that little purple heart back with the same pearlescent paper, so I just used some liquid adhesive to adhere that in place. And then just one final touch, I'm going to add some of the sequins, and I'm just placing them in the same spot as shown on the card sketch. And that is card number 5. For card number 6, I'm using sketch number 5 from Reverse Confetti. And I love that this paper pack has a lot of pink. If you don't know, I love pink. It's the name of my blog, The Best Things in Life Are Pink. So for the background of this card, I just used this muted pink pattern paper, and I just used a stitched rectangle die. And then I used some more of this striped paper. I think it was in the first card. So I still had a little piece of it left, and I'm going to have that as that rectangular piece in the center of the card. And then for the sentiment, I used the stamp set from January's kit. It says, "When it's dark, look for stars." So I just used some purple ink, and I'm just going to use my mini Misty to make sure I get a nice solid impression. And then of course add a few of the peel-offs. So these are those lilac mirror peel-offs again. Just putting 2 of them on the side of the sentiment. Since the sentiment wasn't real long, I didn't want to have a whole lot of extra white space there. And then it never hurts to have a little extra shine. So I'll just adhere that sentiment on and then put the card front onto a card base. And then I'll just add that small paper scrap on the inside of the card. Don't want any of those little paper scraps to go to waste. And then I pulled out some more of that pearlescent paper. This is the purple, and I used a stitched star die and just cut out 3 of those. And then I'm just going to pop them just a little bit with some of this thinner foam dimension. And then just one final touch, I cut out a small little banner to put in the upper corner. So that is card number 6. So now I'm on to card number 7. So I'm using a bonus sketch from Operation Ride Home. So this is bonus number 28. So I'm going to make a shaker card. So to start with, I'm going to lay everything out and decide where I'm going to cut out this circle. So I'm going to have some of this pearlescent purple paper in the background of the shaker. So I have that all in place. And then I have the pattern paper, and I'm just going to put this thin circle frame all around it. So I'm just adhering that and making sure that it's all lined up and there's not any extra glue sticking out. And I did put a piece of just solid cardstock behind the pattern paper just to add a little more thickness to that piece of paper, just since I'm going to have it as the front of the shaker. So I put some ATG on the back and then lined it with just that small piece of acetate. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my sentiment. And the reason I used this pattern paper is because I wanted to use this specific sentiment. So it says, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning to dance in the rain. And when I look at this pattern paper, it just looks like rain is falling. So I thought it went together really well. So now I'm going to go ahead and build up the shaker. So I just have some foam dimensional tape and I just folded it in half because I'm going to need 2 layers. So I find that it's just easier to use it that way. And a trick that I have learned from my subscribers is if you take the backing off of both sides, you can actually manipulate that foam dimension to go around different shapes, such as a circle. And it really works nicely. So thanks for the tip, I really appreciate it. And so I don't want any of this front to sag in any places. So I am going to add some of the foam tape to pretty much every little opening here. It's always fun to learn different tips from other fellow crafters. It's so great that we can all share and learn together. So I'm just going to finish up with the rest of this foam dimension, cutting some just little teeny tiny pieces to go in the corner and on the sides, and then I'll remove all of the backing from the tape. And now I want to make sure I line it up perfectly with the card, putting a little bit of the anti-static powder on there, and then I'm just going to spoon out some of the sequin mix right in the center where that circle opening will be. And so these are still really staticky, even with this anti-static powder, so they kind of sneak out a little bit, but for the most part I got them all in place. And then I'll just give it a good firm press to make sure none of the sequins escape at all, which there were a couple that did anyway. But so now I'm just going to go ahead and put that card front onto a card base using lots of adhesive. So now I'm going to build this little string of banners that goes across the circle. So instead of using twine or ribbon, I actually have a little die that cuts out this really thin strip that looks like it could be string. And so I adhered that down, and then I also cut out a couple of these little bow die cuts, and then a few of these little faux stitched banners. And I used some more of this satin paper for all those little banners, and I'm just going to glue those all along that string, or the paper string. I started with the one in the center just for placement, and then I'll just build them out from there. They weren't exactly perfect, but the little paper bows kind of hid that on the ends. So now that the little banners are in place, I can adhere those little bow die cuts on one on each end of the little string. And I did make sure to hold all of that in place just for a little bit because I didn't want it to move up. This Nuvo adhesive works really well though, so it adheres nicely. And of course, last little touch, put that little strip of the pattern paper on the inside of the card. So that is card number 7. So now I'm on to card number 8. I'm using Operation Write Home Sketch number 125. So I still had a little bit more of this muted green pattern paper. So I'm going to use that for the background. And I put it on crooked at first, so I did have to pull that up. And I just lined that with some green cardstock. And then I'm going to put it on a little thicker border on some purple cardstock. And again, I put it on crooked. I'm not sure what was going on with this card. So now that I have that all adhered in place, I have just some really small pieces of this pearlescent paper. So it's these little small rectangles that are in that sketch. I really liked the softness and the pattern on this pearlescent paper, so I just thought it looked really nice just in that bottom row on the card. So I lined all of those with some of the purple cardstock, and now I'm just going to adhere those in place. And for placement, again, I'm just putting the outer two down first, and then I just sort of build them in. And then just across the middle of the card, I just put a piece of this green cardstock. But then I wanted to add just a little extra shine, so I'm using some of the holographic peel-offs that came in the January kit. So the January kit is sold out, but Lizi usually releases all of the peel-offs individually. Sometimes it's the next month. So once those are available, I will add a link in the description for those. And the holographic peel-offs are amazing. So now I'm just put that piece of pattern paper on the inside of the card, and then used a really tiny scrap of some of the holographic cardstock for that little banner in the upper corner. And then from one of the mega packs, I had some of these butterfly die cuts. And so I just cut that out of purple and decided to leave it without a sentiment this time. So that is card number 8. And now I'm on to card number 9. So I have quite a few smaller paper scraps left, and so I didn't want to cut into too many more of the full sheets this time. So I'm just taking advantage of all those scraps, and I looked for a sketch that would really help me utilize those pieces. So this is Reverse Confetti sketch number 55. And I like it because it has 2 of the larger pieces, and then you can have a couple smaller pattern papers as well. So I decided this is going to be a very purple card. So I did want to add just a little something extra to the bottom of the card. So I just cut 2 different widths of some of the purple cardstock. And then adding a little extra sparkle, I pulled out those holographic peel-offs again. And I'm just putting a few different sizes on each of those little strips. And then I'll just tuck all of the ends behind, put some adhesive on the back of that card front, and put it right onto a card base. And then adding that thin piece of pattern paper to the inside of the card again. And so I still have a little bit more of this satin paper, so I cut out a scallop circle with it, and then just use some white cardstock for the sentiment. And so this is from that Flutterby sentiment set again, the one that I love, and this is my favorite sentiment from the whole set. Have a beautiful day. I mean, what a perfect sentiment to give to someone to just cheer them up. So I'm just going to add a little bit of foam dimension, just using these little thinner squares, putting those on the back to just pop it up just that little bit. And overall, this card is fairly simple, but I did want to do one final little touch and used a few of the Nuvo drops in that upper right hand corner. And these are the plum pudding color. So that is card number 9. So now I'm on to card number 10. I'm using Operation Write Home sketch number 214. So this is another really great sketch for using up just little scraps. So this one has an assortment of these thin strips for the top of the card. So there isn't really a specific measurement. You just kind of use what you have, cut them a little thinner if you need to, maybe leave them a little wider. I did have to do a little extra trimming because I wanted to leave a little bit of the blue cardstock showing between all of them. And now I'm going to stamp just a general sentiment on the bottom using the stamp set. This is the add-on stamp set from the January kit. So it just says best wishes, and I'm going to use some of the warm navy embossing powder again. It just matches really nicely with the blues and the greens on this card. So I use some of that anti-static powder just to avoid any of the little extra pieces on there. I'll just go ahead and heat emboss that. And again, you can't really see it, but it does have a really lovely shine on there. And this paper is some white pearlescent paper. I always have a pack of it on hand because I love the pearlescent paper. But it's hard to stamp on without the ink smudging, so it's always a good one to do heat embossing with. So I just added a little scallop border beneath that just to add a little separation from the cardstock. And then again, a few of the holographic peel-offs. I really like these. So I just put a thin one on the top and the bottom of this white pearlescent paper. So I'll just go ahead and put that card front onto a card base. And again, I'll add just that small piece of pattern paper on the inside of the card. At this point, I don't have a whole lot of the scraps left over. So now for my image, I used this really fun little peacock feather die. So this is very similar to the Love from Lizi logo. So this is a die that is available in the shop, so I will have a link to that below. And I wanted to use two colors for it. So I have it that dark navy and then also some of this turquoise. And I just put them just slightly off so that both of the colors would show when I glued them down. And then I put the blue heart on the inside, and I wanted to add a little extra shine, so I'm just using some of this Midnight Sky glitter Nuvo drops. And then I wanted to add just a few of them just in that corner above the sentiment. And then one final little touch, I'll just use another of that, just a little scrap of that holographic cardstock for a banner in the upper corner. So that is card number 10. So here is a quick recap of the 10 cards plus the bonus card made using Love from Lizi's Watercolor Wonders paper pack. It's another beautiful paper assortment, and I really enjoyed getting to make cards with it. I will include links in the description box for all of the products used. If you enjoyed my video, please subscribe, and don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.